Good afternoon, Mr. O'Neill. My name is Alfred. This is Danica. We are the accountants that you have hired to take a look at Nortel Network Corporation's financial statements at the time that you purchased the stock. We have come today to give you our findings. The agenda for today will go as follows. We'll first take a look at the company through a SWOT analysis, and then we'll go and move on to the major issues that we have found with the company, followed by the minor issues which support these major issues. And in the discussion, we will discuss these minor issues in greater detail. And finally, we'll give you a conclusion of our findings and how this can help you later on in other investments.
Alright, so I'm going to take you through a brief SWOT analysis of Nortel in 2000. So strengths of Nortel was their ability to acquire research and development from small companies by buying these companies. This not only increased the size of Nortel, but also the amount of information they were able to gather through the industry. Weaknesses would have been, we said, the management tone at the top. So this was how they falsified financial statements and earnings targets by manipulating accounting information and accounting policies rather than using the actual numbers that were provided from the company. Some opportunities, or one opportunity that we found for Nortel would be they could have streamlined their products and services and tailored them more towards their customers, where what they did is they stretched themselves a little too thin, providing too much too quickly. Threats would be that Nortel took up 35% of the Toronto Stock Exchange, so any fluctuation in Nortel stock would greatly affect the Toronto Stock Exchange and vice versa. So any fluctuation on the market would severely affect Nortel's stock. Also, Nortel was listed not only on the Toronto Stock Exchange but the New York Stock Exchange. So the US economy and the stability there had a major influence on Nortel's stock at the time. So the major issues that we came up with were their inflated earnings and also the financial statements that may have been unfaithfully represented. We are going to support these with our findings in our financial ratio analysis, as well as our qualitative research regarding revenue recognition procedures, as well as ethical and managerial issues.
So first of all, we're going to give you a little bit of a rundown on the financial statements without any ratios that we've calculated, because as you have requested yourself, Mr. O'Neill, you want to know if there were any red flags. And so even just from looking at the financial statements, there are certain red flags that come up. The first of which we want to talk about is the earnings before tax. As you can see from this chart, earnings are pretty good until 98, where they take a steep drop, where they make over $1 billion less than they did in 1997. This is very worrying, and in 1999, when they report their earnings again, it is only at $526 million. This number is, seems good, but at the same time, it is only less than half of what was recorded in 1996. This worrying red flag is shown to be correct, as in 2000 and 2001, their earnings before taxes are in the negative. The next one we want to take a look at is net cash inflow or outflow from discontinued operations. This category we thought was very important because generally when you have a discontinued operations, it means that that operation is no longer viable in the sense that it is inefficient, ineffective, or obsolete. And so before 1999, there are no records of any discontinued operations, which meant the company, which is one of the signs that a company is doing very well and is healthy and stable. In 1999, they record their first discontinued operations and at a loss at that of over $800 million. This continues as a trend in 2000 2001, so this red flag was something that stockholders, including yourself, could have taken a look at. Last one we want to show you is the net increase or decrease in cash flow. There is a positive number from 1996 through to 1998 at a very substantial increase in cash inflow to the company. But in 1999, there's a huge red flag raised when the cash is now suddenly an outflow as a net number of $2 million, which, if you take a difference, is over $1 billion. This red flag is shown to be correct, as in 2000 they lose even more money, and that is when their stock prices went down. And now as we take these numbers and we apply them to certain ratios which allow us a deeper look into the company, we see more red flags as well. And the difference in net operating assets, there is a $7 billion increase in net operating assets from 1999 to 2000. This is quite a substantial increase. As you can see from doing the balance sheet accrual ratio, which is taking the net operating asset and seeing what kind of a percentage change it is, we see that it is a 48% increase in net operating asset. And once again, that also happens in 1998. To have net operating assets increase by such a huge amount is a worrying sign, and that is shown as in 2001, that number takes a huge drop. The last one that we want to show you and that you have requested yourself is the cash flow statement accruals ratio. Generally, a negative number is indicative of a good stock that you can invest in, and in this case we do see that. But the thing that we have to keep in mind is this accrual ratio is a measure of liquidity. And though liquidity can be a good thing, as it is shown here, at the same time, Nortel Networks, as a huge corporation that they are, and especially in the financial position that they were, including the other flags that we have raised, liquidity was not their biggest issue at the moment. The thing that they needed to worry the most about was stability, and that is seen as everything else pointed in the opposite direction.
All right, so some qualitative issues that we came up with were the bill and hold procedures that they were using. They were using these transactions. They were going to their customers and telling the customers to start adopting these procedures, whereas the US GAAP states that customers must request this type of transaction, as well as all ownership and risk must transfer with the product or inventory that is being sold. And Nortel was actually selling inventory and recognizing revenue when they were selling it to their subsidiaries, such as Telemon Corporation. And they were recognizing revenue right away, which goes against the US GAAP procedures as well. And then there were the earnings targets that they were meeting by manipulating accounting procedures rather than using the numbers that they were provided. There were also ineffective internal controls, which could have been because of the lack of accounting expertise that their higher management had, as well as there was the lack of integrity between Nortel and the subsidiaries, which was also part of the bill and hold transactions where they were just shipping off inventory to their the smaller companies that they had acquired and recognizing revenue right away rather than waiting until the inventory had actually been sold to someone that wasn't owned by Nortel.
So in conclusion, Mr. O'Neill, we see that, as you have said yourself, there were enough red flags within the company, financial statements at the time before 2000, that there was something wrong with the company. And in retrospective look, if we take a look at the data that came after your investment, we see that this is justified in those financial statements. Not only that, there were certain managerial and ethical issues that were happening in the background, which was released later on, that we didn't know of, but shows and justifies our conclusions that yes, the red flags that we had figured out on the financial statements earlier were indeed truly that, red flags, and not just a blip in the radar. And so what you can take away from this, Mr. O'Neill, is that you can use both looking at financial statements on the surface, you can do accounting ratios, and you can also take a deeper look into the management hierarchy of businesses in order to make a more well-informed decision in terms of stock investment. This is our presentation for you, and if you have any questions, please ask.